I'd like for you to turn to Matthew chapter 17. Last night and this morning have been powerful, and tonight as well. And it's been heavy, so I decided to go light and superficial tonight. I want to read with you Matthew chapter 17, beginning at verse 1, and read down through verse 8. Now, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud, saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise and do not be afraid. And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Lord, make that possible in our lives tonight. Everything else stripped aside, all other issues removed, no other thoughts present, all concerns diminished, and you appear. If you would appear, that would happen. And what we're asking for tonight is not for you to gently pass by. We're not asking you for a touch. We're asking you to come crashing in upon us, to smash, crash, invade, strongly force, pick us up, throw us against the wall. Whatever it has to happen in order to change us, let that take place. For the sake of our world, for the sake of the situation we're in, for the sake of the desperate need of this hour, do something so phenomenally great and overwhelming that we literally see you transfigured. To that end, we commit these moments and expect, in Jesus' name, amen. Basically, what's happening is no one was getting it. Jesus has been preaching for 2.5 years. No one's really tying in. You would think his disciples would be, but it hasn't been happening. The crowds certainly haven't been tying in. Their whole approach has been, touch my flesh, make me feel better. They're all wrapped up in miracles. They're all wrapped up in feeding their own face. They're all wrapped up in what their needs are, and Jesus seems to be a means to that end. So they're on board. They want to make him king, but they're not buying into who he is. They're not getting to the heart of the matter. They haven't really seen what he's all about. Redemption is not really taking place in their lives. So Jesus is dismissing the crowd. Wiped his hands, done with the fame, done with the popularity. Not a bit appealing to him at all. He has something else on his mind. The disciples, he finds out, have not been getting it either. In chapter 16, he brought them to a test. Asked them the question, who do you say that I am? They came through. They really believe he's the Messiah. The difficulty came when he tried to describe to them what that meant. See, there's no question they believe he's the Messiah. The problem is they haven't bought into this bleeding, suffering, dying kind of Messiah. And he immediately walks them into the idea by giving them his first prediction of his death and resurrection. And as he talks about his death and resurrection, they explode in his face. They literally get into his face and say, hey, not going to be. Now again, it's not that they don't believe in him. They do believe in him. It's not that they don't believe he's the Messiah. They do. But they've got their own idea about what a Messiah is. They have their own concept of what what he ought to be like and what he ought to do and what the program is and where he's going with this and where he should go with this. See, they've got that all in their head. They're all into the power. Hey, they don't mind that. The miracles, they love that. See, the comfort of all of that, hey, they're in on that. They want all of that. But when he begins to talk about the bleed, suffer, and die stuff, when he begins to talk about how you're going to pour your life out, when he begins to talk about, hey, you're going to lose yourself. In fact, if you don't, you won't ever save yourself. That the only possibility you've got to save yourself is to lose yourself. And as he begins to pound that in their ears, for 6 solid days, they argued with him, which is 17 verse 1, for 6 days. 6 days they went after this. Jesus used every kind of argument he could use. Jesus used every kind of mental gymnastics to pull them into it. Jesus used every kind of scripture he could pull them to. He laid it out, argument, everything. It just didn't. They aren't buying it. They just aren't buying it. Now, what are you going to do with a group like that? See, they want the church. They want religion. We want to offer sacrifice lambs. See, we like the rules. We like the decency of life. It's good for our kids. We want, hey, we're a good old boy community. You're good, I'm good. Let's have a beer after church. What are you going to do with a group like that? Yeah, we want to help people. I've got some leftovers. Yeah, we want to care for some folks, but hey, don't call me late at night. Yeah, hey, I want to support, but don't talk about bleeding, suffering, and dying. I'm not interested in going that far. What do you do with a group like that? You can yell louder. He did that for 6 days. You can argue. He did that for 6 days. You can philosophize. He did that for 6 days. You can lay out the scriptures. He did that for 6 days. He demonstrated it for 2.5 years. They're still not buying it. So are we going to continue arguing? Are we going to continue with philosophy? Let's have another seminar. See, what are we going to do, people? We'll have another cross-style conference. We'll gather together again. We'll sing songs and feel good. 6 days. End of 6 days, no mind is changed. End of 6 days, you think what you think, I think what I think. End of 6 days, our world goes on. Our town is the same. Here we are. What are you going to do with a group like that? Jesus threw up his hands and said, I don't know what to do. Except, hey, I'm taking you boys to the mountain. I'm going to take you to the mountain. Hey, Peter, James, John, with me, boys. And I'm going to take you to the mountain. Well, what's the big deal about the mountain? Oh, it's going to be on the mountain that the Father's going to come down. It's going to be on the mountain that the law and the prophets are going to be revealed. It's going to be on the mountain. It's going to be on the mountain, man, that you are going to end up seeing no one except me. It's going to be on the mountain that the vision is going to become clear. It's going to be on the mountain, friend, that revelation is going to come. It's going to be on the mountain that suddenly there is going to be such an overwhelming presence, and everything that you've been involved in is going to be pushed aside, and you're going to be stripped down and have nothing left at all. It's going to be on the mountain that, hey, I'm going to take you to the mountain. This will be a hard trip. This will be difficult, but I'm taking you to the mountain, because it's on the mountain that there's going to come a crashing in, not a light superficial, a crashing in. It's going to be on the mountain that there's going to be extreme measures offered. It's going to be on the mountain that the heavens are going to split wide open. It's going to be on the mountain that truth is going to penetrate. It'll be on the mountain that a sword will cut you at your very gut level. It'll be on the mountain that the mind will be turned in reverse. It'll be on the mountain that you will see what you've never seen before. It'll be on the mountain. I want you to go with me to the mountain. When they went to the mountain, there are three aspects of what took place. Number one was direct communication. Jesus is the focal point of all history. Number two is the divine confirmation. Verse 5. Jesus is the focal point of all of God's dreams. Number three is the distinct continuation. Verse 2. Jesus is the focal point of man's destiny. Do you want to go to the mountain? Direct communication. Jesus is the focal point of all history. It's verse 3. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Now, it's surprising that these Old Testament men, they've been steeped in this. Come on. It isn't like they just got off the pickle boat. It isn't like they just joined Judaism. Come on. This has been their life. They've studied down at the synagogue. They are steeped in the Old Testament. They can quote the stories. They memorized the first 5 books as a kid. Come on. They know this stuff. Why wouldn't they get this? They've been to Sunday school every Sunday morning for the last 50 years. Come on. These guys have been through cross-style conference after cross-style conference after cross-style conference. Come on. These guys have endured sermon after sermon after sermon. Count the number of ones you've endured. Why wouldn't they get this? They have missed it. Do you see how easy it is to miss it? To sit right in the midst of all the lingo, right in the midst of all the language, right in the midst of all of the precious hymns, right in the midst of all of it, and you just missed it. They missed it. With their whole life focused on a coming Messiah, with all of the prophetic history of the voice of the prophets sounding in their ears about this, and here they are, the Messiah is here, and they don't know what he's all about. They missed it. So Jesus says, hey, come on, guys. Go to the mountain with me. Well, what's going to happen on the mountain? Well, let the law speak. Can you see him? Verse 5, or verse 3. Behold, Moses, who is the symbol of all the law, the height of man's obligation to God, the law, a God who says, I'm a holy God. And we looked at him and said, well, that's nice. Good for you. But I don't have a clue of what that means. What does you being holy have to do with anything? He says, I'll tell you and explain to you what holy God is all about. If I were a man walking in your shoes, here's how I would live. And he wrote the law. And the law was the physical activity of the holy actions of God if he became man, which is why Jesus fulfilled the entirety of the law. That was the Old Testament, folks. That's Moses. Well, what did that high standard, what did that demonstration, what did that high emphasis, what did that display do? What did it produce? Absolutely nothing. Moses is on the mountaintop, folks, with God receiving the 10 Commandments on tablets of stone. And while the very law is being given to the people, you think they're at the base of the mountain bowing and saying, oh, the law's coming into our life. We're going to obey. We want to line up. Do you think that's what they're? No, they're melting down their golden jewelry and making a golden calf, and they're dancing around it, having a big time, worshiping a God they made with their own fingertips. And while the very law was being given to them, they are literally absolutely breaking that law, because the law never produced righteousness in anybody's life. The writer of the Hebrews said to us, he's writing to Jews, don't you Jews understand that the law is obsolete? I didn't write that. Paul said, don't you understand the law served its purpose? What was its purpose? A school teacher. To teach you, you're not adequate. You can't pull this off. You can't get this done. That the law convinced us of one thing, that you will never do anything good enough to get you in. Therefore, you'll never do anything bad enough to keep you out. Because this is no longer about what you do or don't do. This is about intimacy and relationship with him. Can you see Moses and Elijah? They've come down. They're in a holy huddle with Jesus floating right off the mount. And in that holy huddle with their heads together, Moses turns to Jesus and they had a conversation. What did they talk about? Luke chapter 9 verse 31 says they spoke about his bleed, suffer, and die stuff. And the law, Moses turned to Jesus and said, don't let these disciples, these brain dead disciples, talk you out of this. Don't you dare, don't you listen to them. Don't you budge 1 inch on this, man. I'm telling you, the law never brought anybody into righteousness, and the law never brought anybody into intimacy with God, and the law never brought anybody into everything they need to be in purity. That the only shot we've got is you've got to go bleed, suffer, and die. It's going to take a cross at the heart of every individual. Come on, Jesus, plant the cross in the middle of our world. Plant the cross in the middle of our world. Bring death to our self-centeredness. Change the very nature and core of our system. Because if you don't come crashing in upon our lives with the radical internal change of the very essence of our being, we will never, ever, ever embrace this righteousness of God. For the law is just not adequate. Let the law speak. And it says, you better get to Jesus. Let the prophets speak. Again, verse 3. Behold, Moses and Elijah. Elijah is the symbol of all the prophets. What a guy. He warned. He was the most dramatic of all the apostles. Of all the prophets. He warned them. He was a fireball of preaching. He was so attractive that guys like Elisha said, I'm going to follow this prophet around, and when he dies, he'll throw his mantle on me. Woo! I want what he's got. That's how powerful this man was. This man was so powerful, this prophet. He prayed, and the rain stopped, and there was a drought over all the country. And in the middle of that drought, a famine came about. And finally, this is the guy, you know Elijah. This is the guy who stood before Ahab and said, hey, I'm declaring a day of war, man. Bring it on, baby. Let's get down and dirty about it. You get your 450 prophets of Baal and your 400 prophets of the grove, and you bring them all in, and let's have a contest. This is the boy that took the knife, took the sword, and cut off 450 heads of the prophets of Baal. This is the guy that called down fire from heaven. This is, woo! If anybody's going to bring righteousness to Israel, it'll be this guy. But you know where he was a few days after all of that? Hiding in a cave from a woman. What is this? And what is he saying to us? He's saying that all of our preaching and all of our yelling and all of our hotshot programs and all of our video and all of our display, and what does it all add up to? Absolutely nothing. Because it didn't bring Israel into righteousness, and Israel went right on in her sin and right on into Babylonian captivity, and the whole thing went right on down the tubes. So can you see Elijah, Moses, and Jesus in this holy huddle? And Moses has just turned to Jesus and said, Jesus, the law never brought righteousness. You got to go to a cross. You got to bleed, suffer, and die. You got to pull people into this. They've got to learn. They've got to come. You're going to have to plant the cross in the middle of the hearts of men and women. They're going to have to bleed, suffer, and die to themselves. And if there isn't nature change, nothing's going to change, Jesus. So, hey, the law can't accomplish this. Elijah is saying, hey, Jesus, we can yell and scream and produce more preachers, but Jesus, it isn't going to pull it off, man. You got to go to the cross. We got to have some bleeding, suffering, and dying going on. We got to have some people with the cross planted in the middle of their life. And Jesus, if you don't do that, we're going to go right on and be a good boy town. A good old boy town. Don't you like our music? Preacher tells good jokes. What are you going to do with these guys? Take them to the mountain where Jesus will come crashing in, and the heavens will open up, and Moses and Elijah will come down, and Jesus will be seen as the very point, the very core, the very funnel. Everything funnels to the pivotal issue of all of history. And folks, I'm here to declare, as everyone has declared, you've only got one shot. Well, I'll work harder. I'll read my Bible more. I'll pray extra long. I'll give more money. Well, that might work. And if you're depending on performance level, if you're depending on activity to get this done, if you're depending on your self-discipline, if you're depending on I'll turn over a new leaf. If there is a smattering of any of that going on, if you make that combination between, well, yes, it's Jesus, but man, I got to work like a dog. And if you tie that thing together, you will have missed it. You need to come to the mountain, son, and let him come crashing in upon you until you end up seeing nothing but him and him alone. Direct communication. Jesus is the focal point of all history. There is also divine confirmation, which is verse 5. Jesus is the focal point of all of God's dreams. This is so phenomenal. He says, while he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. Back up, beginning of verse 5. While he was still speaking. Well, who was speaking? Who had a right to speak on the mountain? Who had a right to open their mouth on the mountain, man? Yeah, down in the valley when you're arguing philosophy, help yourself, brother. And hey, when we're sitting at a table and arguing about concepts of doctrine, okay, you got your idea, you yell, I'll yell, we'll all yell together. Okay, we'll buy into that. But when you come to the mountain and God is crashing in and bringing such strong revelation, who's got the gall to open their mouth? Well, Peter does. While Peter was still speaking, but you see, he'd been doing that for 6 days. Talk. He hadn't been listening for 6 days. That's why he needed to come to the mountain. Because the talk is all characteristic of his own thought process and the value of his own thinking. And he just loves the sound of his own thoughts. Talk. And even when he's listening, he's thinking about what he's going to say to what you're saying. Talk. Which means I'm never listening. I'm always thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm either thinking about what I'm going to say or I'm saying it. Talk. There he is. Peter, you need to come to the mountain, friend. You need to come to the mountain. And it's interesting, Peter has such great moments in his life. Like chapter 16, when he stands tall and straight and says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Peter and Jesus is just blown away by Peter and say, "Whoa, hey, blessed are you. You got this, you didn't get this from downtown. You've been messing around in the mind of God." And then just a few verses later, he's talk, rebuking Jesus like, "You don't know what you're talking about, but I do. So Jesus, hey, come to me for advice and I'll give it to you." Talk. It sounds like my prayer life. Just let it soak. Wow. I need to go to the mountain. Well, what's going to happen on the mountain? Divine interruption. Verse 5. While he was still speaking, you don't need to be a Greek scholar to get this. It's so plain. While he was still speaking, meaning talk, while Peter is talk, what happens? A bright cloud overshadows them, and suddenly a voice comes out of the cloud saying. So all that God is going to say is during Peter's talk. In fact, God ends up with the statement, "Shut up and listen to him." Which is an interruption. But then how would God ever get anything said if he didn't interrupt? Because I'm so busy. I got a schedule, man. I got the second job and and then I got to go over and then I'm going down to, and then the radio's on. Well, turn the TV on too. And listen, I've got headphones on my life is. So how would God ever get a word in edgewise in your life if he didn't interrupt? And some of those interruptions are so painful. What if you got cancer of the throat and couldn't? Would that shut you up? See, what would it take for God to get your attention? Because, see, I'm so comfortable in my talk. See, I know I'm so comfortable in the raising of my hand, and it makes me feel good. See, I'm so comfortable with, I've picked out the church I want to go to because I like it. See, I didn't pick out a church because I said, whoa, I want where I can roll my sleeves up and pour my life out and bleed, suffer, and die. No. I came to a church that's meet my needs. So God just has to come and just plain flat interrupt. And could I tell you, he does that. So you see, there's divine, on the mountain, you got to come to the mountain. See, in the valley, you can just keep talking. But if you come to the mountain, oh, he's going to come crashing in. This is not a light. Oh, Jesus passed by. Yeah, drove by the billboard. Jesus saves. Thank you. See, this is not, he touched me. Thank you, Bill Gaither. See, that's not this. See, this is God crashing in upon my life, smashing me in the loving kindness of his being, throwing me against the wall, saying, hey, Manley, shut your mouth, boy. I'm trying to tell you something. I'm trying to tell you something. And do you know how hard that is for a preacher who gets paid for? Well, if God's going to interrupt my life, what's he going to say? Divine explanation, verse 5. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Now, the grammar of that is really exciting. It's startling, actually, because it's in what the scholars call an historical aorist, which, who knows what that means? The aorist is the idea of, we don't have any tense like it in English at all. Aorist is like a beginning tense. Like you were inventing a language, and as you invent this language, you invent words. You invent words that are nouns, chair, pulpit, watch, those kind of words. Those are all noun things. You name stuff. Okay, we got that done in our language. Then you invent verbs, which are actions that these nouns are going to do. So you invent verbs. Kick, love, yell, run, those kind of words. Now, we haven't got tense yet because we haven't invented when they do that. And then you invent past tense, present tense, future tense. But aorist is the beginning of that. We haven't invented tenses yet. We've just invented the verbs, which have nothing to do with when it happens. It's just the verb. That's aorist. I don't know whether the Greek scholars would agree with this or not. But see, in my mind, that whole thing brought me to, this is the closest we have to where God lives. See, he doesn't live in the future. He doesn't live in the past. He doesn't live in the present. He lives in the action. The eternal action of the verb. Did you know in the heart reality, I'm talking heart reality of God, Jesus is dying right now for you. See, we go, oh, ancient event. But in the heart and mind of God, this very second, That's why your sin nails him now. And this is in the aorist tense, but it's in the historical aorist, which means Jesus is not pleasing to the Father because, yeah, he's been a good boy. Yeah, cleaned his room. Did the miracles I told him to. And he's been a good boy. That's not why Jesus is pleasing, because he's performed well. See, this is in the mind and heart of God. Sometime, someplace, who knows when, where, what. That's totally immaterial. The Father is saying, oh, Son, you just delight me. You just please me. Not because you've kept the law, not because you came to church, not because but because you just bothers me. We'll come to healing, for instance, and we'll pray for some dear saint. Oh, Lord, she is worthy, he is worthy. No, you're not. God isn't going to heal you because you're worthy. Because you're not worthy. If he's going to heal me, why would he heal me? Oh, because I'm pleasing. He delights. Had nothing to do with. And so, what's happening here in the grammar? It's very strong. Do you see it? He says, again, verse 5, he says, this is my, that's ownership. That in this aorist, focused on the event itself, focused on the action of the verb, the pleasing itself, is this ownership of God. The reason you're pleasing is because you're mine. And then he gives the word beloved, my beloved, which means you're the object of my love. And then he gives the son idea, which is the relational involvement of all of this. And this is the one I'm pleased with. This is the one I delight in. This is the one I put my total stamp of approval upon. Where does that kind of where do you find out that kind of stuff for your life? On the mountain, where God comes crashing in. See, you don't get that on your way to the job, thinking about what you're going to. You don't get that in the middle of a family argument. You don't get that. See, you get that when God comes crashing in. You need to go to the mountain. You need to hear this. This is the kind of thing that takes you from 6 days of argument into life change, where God comes crashing in, and the law and all the prophets is revealed, and Jesus is seen, and the Father speaks, and you're changed. You need to come to the mountain. Did you notice in the statement as well, there's not only divine interruption, divine explanation, but divine elimination. This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him. Quit listening to everything else. Hear him. Well, this is what I've always been taught. Nobody cares. Hear him. This is what I've always thought. Hear him. Hear him. This is what my emotions say. Hear him. Hear him. Hear him. Hear him. Hear. This is what the church, hear him. Hear him. This is what the hear him. This is what the radio, hear him. Hear him. Hear him. This is the logic of our culture. Hear him. Hear him. Where is everything else going to be silenced for you? When are you going to come where everything else is going to be filtered out, and in the middle of the clamor of your world, with all the voices screaming in your ear and in your head, there is such a clarity that you don't hear anything but him? Where is that going to happen? On the mountain. You got to come to the mountain, man. You got to come to the mountain. It's on the mountain that this will happen. And you will see that the focal point of all of God's dreams are focused on Jesus. And you need to listen to him. You need to listen to him. There's a third element. It's the distinct continuation. Jesus is the focal point of man's destiny. God has a dream for humanity. He has a dream for you. It probably isn't what you think it is. Why? Because unless you've been to the mountain, you don't know. You got to go to the mountain to see it. Because that's verse 2. He was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as light. He starts with the radiation idea, which is the word transfigured. The word transfigured is literally the idea of metamorphosis. It's the idea of, and I don't know how we got so messed up on this my whole life, but the Mount of Transfiguration is not the declaration that Jesus is divine. The Mount of Transfiguration is the declaration that Jesus is man filled with God. And he's been arguing with his disciples. Guys, I got to bleed, suffer, and die. Why? The law couldn't produce this. The prophets and yelling and screaming and miracles don't produce this. Well, produce what? I'm going to show you. This is what bleeding, suffering, and dying is going to produce. What he is. Well, what is he? Let me show you. And he's transfigured right before their very eyes, which is the demonstration of what a man filled with the Spirit looks like. And the whole idea is radiation in the transfiguration. In other words, Jesus is transfigured, which doesn't mean that there is a light shining on him. It doesn't mean there's a brightness about him. It means it's like the flashlight underneath the sheet. It's like something, the light that's inside shining out. It's like there's this radiation from within just. And he says, I'm going to show you what the fullness of the Spirit looks like. Physically looks like, if you could see it with spiritual eyes. And he's literally turns into this brightness from the inside out. I think that's what these guys have been talking about before, hasn't it? That was what the whole first sermon was on, right? About this light stuff. Jesus says, Here's God's dream for your life, which the law can't produce, and the prophets and yelling and screaming and churchy stuff can't get done. The only way this can happen is you got to go to the mountain, man, and you got to hear him and him alone until there's God just comes crashing in and literally revamps the entire internal nature structure of your being, and you begin to glow from the inside out. In the study of Peter's sermon on Pentecost, we got into one of the ideas that Peter proposes is the idea in as Jesus gave the prophecy. It came out of the Psalms. He talked about a dancing face. I just want you to go to the mirror. Do you have a dancing face? I got so many problems. I know. Life is so hard. I got it. Got an ingrown toenail. Whoa. Could you come to the mountain where circumstances don't matter, where all the crud of what's around you, with all the difficulties and the pressures of your day suddenly are swept up and you see nothing but Him, and suddenly He comes crashing in upon your life and so revolutionizes your inner beings that you just glow. That's this. And then he talks about, after the radiation thing, he talks about the reflection. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. His clothes begin to reflect this. So if you want to play that out, that's fine. See, he comes, radically transforms my inner nature, I glow from the inside out, and my activities begin to take on that glowing and begin to reflect what's going on in here. Guys, I want you to come to the mountain, because if you could have this happen to you, this is why I'm going to bleed, suffer, and die. This is where we're headed. The law isn't going to get this done. Come on. Building 3 tabernacles won't pull this off. Come on. Oh, Jesus, give us a moment. I know, God, Christianity is a lifestyle. Nobody knows that better than I. I know that the cross is not an event in time. It's a long-range, day after day style attitude spill out of my life. I got it. I get that. But dear Jesus, there has to be moments at the mountain. And we're not dictating what you ought to do in our lives tonight. But Lord, we crave. Oh, we crave. We've been craving for several years. Craving a mountaintop deal where you just come crashing in upon us, and all of our little ideas, our talk are interrupted, and all of our little arguments and it's all just washed away, and suddenly we are swept up and we see nothing but you. And our natures are changed and we glow as you glow. Could this be the solution to my home problem? Could this be the solution to the argument at my job? Could this be the solution to the conflict? I've yacked my mouth for 6 days. And Lord, could it be we don't need more argument and we don't need more holiness explanation? We need to go to the mountain. Heads are bowed. What if the mountain experience that does this is not the typical idea of God crashing in upon us and we all just kind of tremble and walk away saying, wasn't His presence there? What if this is, hey, You, and you, come with me. What if you have to come to the mountain? What if everything God is reserving for you at the mountain? You're going to have to crawl your way there. What if you have to want it so bad in your life you can't? The pride is swept away, and embarrassment is embraced if necessary, and everything is released. What if? And you notice we don't stand here during altar calls and we don't sing. We make it as hard for you to come as we can possibly make it. How bad do you want to come to the mountain? How far would you go? Would you shut your mouth? Would you listen? And would you let him come crushing in upon your life tonight? You don't have to. You can keep on talking. Moments of seeking.